Wargaming has just introduced their very first Italian premium tank destroyer, the Vipera. Now this thing is absolutely disgusting and pretty much shows how we as a community are not being listened to at all in terms of what we want. This tank plays pretty much like a heavy and puts 95% of heavy tanks at tier 8 to shame. The Vipera is the manifestation of promoting bad and lazy gameplay, but since it is so insanely broken, it was sell like candy and is already up for grabs in the premium store for the cheapest price of 40 euros. Armor wise, it is literally a mix of a chieftain and a 279, but at tier 8. Its turret and hull armor are absolutely ridiculous and it only has 2 tiny weak spots that you aren't even guaranteed to hit. It is an auto-loading gun with 6-second long intra-clip reloads, so it basically functions as a single shooter heavy tank that shoots you for a whopping 2000 damage in 24 seconds if you're constantly firing. Now the 24-second total clipping time doesn't sound all that ridiculous, but when you factor the shell's alpha, the turret armor and the gun depression into the equation, which is by the way -10, you basically get a single shooter tank that you're unable to fight hull down head on, and he's just simply going to chip away at your HP insanely fast. Just take a look at this game. I did 5.2 thousand damage in just 5 minutes without any kind of effort. When this tank's super test stats and armor model got released for the very first time, it already caused an uproar within the community for obvious reasons. People demanded it to be nerfed since there is no counterplay to its armor model other than loading gold rounds, and the turret, which has no visible cupola, can only be penetrated by tier 10 gold rounds. This is Wargaming's double-edged sword. You first buy a super broken premium, but even if you don't buy it, you as a normal tank player have to load gold if you want to have any kind of chance of penetrating this tank frontally. Hence, Wargaming still makes money off of you, since you have to find a way to finance those premium shells. I have to point out, however, that Wargaming indeed nerfed a couple of things about it. First of all, it is a tiny strip of armor which used to be 30mm thick and now it's 20mm thick, which basically means that calibers higher than 60mm can automatically penetrate it from any kind of angle. This strip, however, is so thin that it is super hard to hit with most guns. They also nerfed its HP to 1300 from 1400 and they lowered the top speed by a whopping 2 km per hour. Huge nerfs, right? Let's talk a little bit about the gun handling. This is marketed as a TD, but the only thing that reminds you that it is a TD is the fact that you can only traverse your gun in a 90-degree arc. The gun's accuracy is super frustrating and so is the aiming time. Even with full bond equipment, it was extremely annoying playing this gun and you have to be close to your targets at all times if you want any kind of damage. You can completely forget about snapshotting or hitting tiny weak spots at medium to long ranges. The penetration and velocity values of its shells are very average and directly comparable to most heavies at its tier. 220mm for its AP shells and 264mm for its APCR shells. All this, however, doesn't matter if you can get into a hold down position like I did on mines and basically have all day to aim at the enemy, while they literally stand no chance of doing damage back to you. The mobility is kinda bad and the usage of turbo is absolutely essential. However, it still turns fast enough to prevent enemy medium tanks from trying to get behind you. This is the only tier 8 tank in a game that you're not going to win a 1v1 fight against if you both have full HP. 2000 overall damage means that if the player playing it manages to penetrate all of their shells in a 1v1 fight, this tank can literally clip out all the tier 8 tanks in the game and most tier 9s too, while having crazy armor. Let's not even mention the tier 7s and tier 6s that are trying to fight this tank. They literally stand no chance neither in terms of firepower nor armor. Oh, and I almost missed the best thing about it. Since the armor is fairly weak on the sides, the best angling is no angling. You should at all times try and be facing the enemy with small adjustments and wiggling of your armor. Now let me show you some gameplay with commentary. Pilsen is a great map for hull down tanks, but it's again super funny how Wargaming decided to balance this tank instead of giving it a cupola everyone can pen. In this fight you can see that the enemy tanks with a higher gun caliber than 120mm actually have a small chance to counter you. The forward turret roof is only 40mm thick, which means that it will get overmeshed by tall tanks that are able to hit it like the KV-3. You can also see the same thing here, overmeshed in the same spot after getting hit by the Borsig from 500 meters away. Yet once I learned about this, all it takes to hide said weak spot is to climb up on the hull down spot in front of you, essentially completely hiding your roof and only showing the front of your actual turret, which people have no chance of panning. Look at this poor tier 7 Caro. He absolutely has no idea what tank he just met and he's so enthusiastic about staying in this fight that it actually ends really bad for him. Once again we meet a lonely tier 7 T-43 in the middle of their base. I only shoot him twice, but watch how quickly his HP goes away without him actually realizing it. As I mentioned, the accuracy and gun handling are both kind of garbage to the point of missing even the simplest shots. I played around 15 games in this tank with an average of 3.5 thousand damage, which is slightly lower than my damage on the Renegade and Skoda, but even though you do so much damage, farming constantly from hull down spots gets very repetitive and boring after a while, and it really isn't rewarding at all. In this clip you can see that the gun is extremely trollish at times when it comes to longer ranges. I hope you have a lot of hair because at the end of the day you will probably be close to being bald if you decide to snipe in this tank. In this clip, I will show you what this thing can do to tier 9 and tier 10 heavies. These guys probably didn't know that the Vipera has so many shells, but even after getting to know it, you literally have more DPM than an S-Conk in a 1v1 fight against any of these tanks. Now, I didn't make my usual cuts here to give you an idea how long it takes to load those shells. It's not a short amount of time, but you really shouldn't think of this tank as an auto-loader. By the way, it is very interesting how you can confuse the enemy tanks that do not count your shells. You literally have the shield of doubt on your side, since even if you just run out of your clip, you can pretend you have shells by not falling back into cover instantly. This way you can reload while wasting precious time the enemy has to push you, and by the time they do push you, you are already fully reloaded and ready to clip them. The shell velocities, especially the standard AP rounds, are kinda trash as mentioned before, so at longer ranges you have to lead quite long to be able to hit those moving targets. Let me show you a hard down fight against a Progetto and an AMX. You have 2000 damage at your disposal at all times when fully reloaded, and the minus 10 degrees of gun depression allow you to fully exploit this on even the steepest ridge lines. Watch how they have zero chance of retaliating and doing damage to my well armored turret with virtually no weak spots. Whenever you are confronted by a low alpha, low pen heavy tank, feel free to push them face to face as they will just struggle to penetrate you at all. This is truly pay to win, as for example this Carnarvon player can only hit the tiny strip of armor that I have on my front to be able to penetrate me. You can clearly see that the gun is extremely painful to snapshot with. Most of the time you won't hit because the aiming time and dispersion values are just too bad for this. Now let's see what this thing can do against the glorious old OP tank, an isolated defender in the middle of nothing. Here I thought I was unsplit after a while, but apparently I wasn't, and I show my side and I get deleted. In this clip you can see some of the most ridiculous things that happened to me while playing this tank. Ghost shells left and right, people YOLOing me unable to penetrate a single shot while I'm reloading, escaping 1vx situations while getting arted, and so on. Enjoy! Once again, this game is the perfect example on how you should play this tank. If you do decide to get it, we'll talk about in a second why you shouldn't do that. You should play it with extreme patience. You should wait for them to make their mistakes first. Their lack of attention will become your ally, and you constantly have to be looking for those opportunities where you can punish them for their mistakes. In this game we had too many campers in the back, so me playing a bit passive eventually bore fruit and allowed me to completely demolish the remainder of this flank, thus denying the enemy team an easy win. Don't be fooled by these shots. These only connect because I am very close to them and I'm fully aimed. If you try to snapshot these you would never hit, but against tanks at the Progetto you can keep picking quite confidently. Against other tier 9 TDs however, bouncing their shots becomes a little harder when your hull armor is exposed. We quickly removed the concept and the motion, completely clearing out this flank. Now the only thing we had to do is break their base camp, but first I have something important to share with you. To answer your question whether you should buy this tank or not, here are my 2 cents about the situation. In my opinion, tanks like this completely alienate the player base from Wargaming by causing sheer amounts of frustration within the community due to them being completely imbalanced. Wargaming obviously benefits off of tank sales and gold rounds, but at this time when we are in the middle of the worst period of World of Tanks, where the Haldan meta rules, I think it would be a great time to start balancing some of these tanks and not releasing completely overpowered premium tanks into its already fragile game state. You do not need to make a premium tank completely busted to be able to sell it. Tell me and prove me wrong in the comments, but in my opinion, as long as a tank is fun to use, people will buy it anyway. I have to say at this point I am very concerned for the future of this game. I understand it is incredibly hard to balance a game with hundreds of tanks and keep them on par with one another. However, the community's frustration is growing like a festering wound, and if Wargaming doesn't tend to it in time, it can quickly send the patient, World of Tanks itself, to the grave.